Welcome to the Things We Don't Talk About podcast with Alison Mulligan and Mike Hartley.
So good morning, Mike. Lovely to see you this morning. How are you?
Hey, it's good to see you too. It's good to see you. Always nice to see a smiling face at the end of a Teams chat. And such a colourful one as well. I love the fact you're keeping the hair going at the moment.
Yeah.
It's marvellous.
I do like to.
So, I guess for people who don't know, who are you? Who am I? Who are we?
I'll start with who are you?
So, I'm Mike Hartley. People may have seen me around as Heart of the Midlands and at the odd event, and definitely at hackathons. If there's a hackathon, I'm there, kind of guaranteed. But then again, so are you. we're sort of kind of hardcore hackathon lovers. But yeah. So yeah, I'm Mike Hartley, and I struggle with mental health issues. There, I've said it. I'm out in the open, and people will not be surprised, because if anybody follows me on Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere or reads my blog, they will see I'm very, very open about this. As I said to somebody yesterday, I'm old enough and ugly enough to not care about being open about this stuff. But I know that there's plenty of people that are. And that's why I'm here with you. And who are you?
Ah, thanks, Mike. By the way, you're not ugly. You're beautiful to me.
Thank you.
My name's Alison Mulligan. You may remember me from such Twitter accounts as AMulligan365 and various hackathon events and various UGs, etc. Some of you I will have met, some of you I won't, but I hope to. I'm just here really as a facilitator, in that I'm somehow settling into the role of co-host for Mike's wonderful idea here, which is the idea of the podcast was the things that we don't talk about, right? We all talk about the tech that we work with all the time, and we all talk about the events that are coming up and what's new and next and what's going on there. But what we don't talk about, as Mike said, is mental health, and it's super important to take care of your mental health. It's super important to recognise things that may be affecting your mental health, and so really the idea is that we would have some guests on, and we'll have an open dialogue about mental health. And helping people to realise that these are things that we should talk about. I think that's probably a reasonable synopsis. Mike, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that strikes me so much is Mark Christie. He released a blog post, it seems years ago now, times this really strange amorphous blob, as I described it the other day. He released a blog post about mental health and consultants in IT and spending time in hotel rooms on your own, strange cities, things like that. And that kind of sent shockwaves through our world, our global community. People were very quick to applaud, rightly so, for somebody actually speaking out. And you started to see people making comments, yeah, I feel the same, I have the same problem. And I had the opportunity to go on the Moses of CRM podcast. Great podcast with Brett from South Africa. And format is 10 questions. And they're meant to be a mix of light-hearted and a mix of serious. And it ended up that the light-hearted ones ended up being more serious and the serious ones ended up being light-hearted. But during it, I thought, stuff it, I'm going to open up and just speak out about my own issues. And Brett shared a bit as well, as he did at Scottish Summit. If you haven't seen it, try and find the video on Scottish Summit for Brett's session. I can't remember if it's there or not. And again, that kind of, I had people reaching out to me. I'd suddenly get a follow on Twitter and then a DM sent to me. And I've blogged, I've posted on LinkedIn and posted on Twitter about my own struggles. And the amount of times I've had people contact me going, it's really brave of you to speak out. Don't know how you can do this so publicly. We feel exactly the same. Microsoft Ignite London, I tweeted out that I suffered social anxiety. I chickened out on meeting one of the nicest guys in the world.
Brian Dagg, 8-Bit Classroom, if anybody listening to this has ever met him, is the nicest person you'd ever meet. Like, he's right up there with Samit. Like, just
exactly
the nicest guy.
Exactly. And he was 6 foot away from me. And I chickened out going and saying hello.
Yeah.
And I just put a tweet out because I thought, well, if I'm feeling this at this event, there are bound to be others.
Yeah.
And I mean, Brian went out of his way to arrange to meet me. He met me outside of a session. He gave me a huge hug. We then spoke quite a bit over the next sort of 24, 36 hours and what have you. And it was, I felt ridiculous for it, but it wasn't something that I could control.
Correct.
And I also knew that. But I had people at Microsoft Ignite hunting me down to come up, and they'd sort of sidle up next to me when I was sat. It was so funny because it'd be sort of like this surreptitious. They'd be looking around, sidle up, and then they'd lean over and go, "You're Mike Hartley, Heart365. Yes. That tweet you sent, I feel exactly the same. Thank you." And I thought, it shouldn't be brave of somebody to turn around and say, I struggle with areas of mental health, because it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, we should be able to talk about this stuff openly. And the reasons that we can't, a lot of that stuff is very deep. It's very deep societal stuff. But I think, you know, what I'm really proud of in the Microsoft community is the supportive nature of it. And you know, I firmly believe if we start opening up this conversation more, you know, some people have started this conversation, and hopefully they'll continue it. We'll continue it. And the more we talk about this stuff, you know, there's a lot that we don't talk about in terms of specific mental health concerns. Things like addiction is very rarely spoken about.
Yes. And
you know, I've done a lot of research into that, and I know, you know, I can talk reasonably knowledgeably about that. Not necessarily as someone that suffers from addiction, but like as I've known plenty of people that have. You know, and these are things that we're not talking about, and almost certainly the person sat next to you at a conference has something going on, right? Yeah. They've got some anxiety, they've got some imposter syndrome, they've got some you know, maybe low-grade addiction issues or substance issues or whatever going on. I shouldn't say issues, should I? Sorry, banned word. But well, you know, everybody's got something going on, right? Like everybody's different, and that's the point, is to open up the conversation and say, just because you feel that way and you feel this way and you think that way and you think this way doesn't mean everybody does, but it does mean that some other people do, right? And whether that's perceived as positive or negative shouldn't enter into the discussion. It should just be that everybody's got their own perspective, everybody's got their own set of feelings, and you know, everybody should be hugely empathetic to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I mean, around all of it, it's the simple fact that for too long there's been stigma.
Yeah,
it is stigma. It is a bias, or it is an inclination to immediately judge somebody who says they struggle with mental health. So just picking up on you saying, oh no, banned word on issues. For me, I think the word issues, it's one of those words that
it has
can have negative connotations to it. And the whole thing around this podcast, and we are going to slip up, I will say mental health issues at points, because that's how we're used to describing it. That's how we're almost conditioned to describing it. But I don't feel that word is helpful for people, because it's not an issue. It's just something. It's part of who they are.
Just is, yeah.
It's something that, there may have to be allowances made. So, going back to your point about addiction, we may need, if we're at an event and we know we've got people who do have addiction issues, we don't put alcohol on the menu. I mean, I know that is a radical thought for the Microsoft community.
I'm just going to throw up the big vegan backlash over Summit 2020 when everybody said we can't just have all vegan food, and like if people were denied meat for one day or even a few hours of that day, it was a giant issue. But yeah, like, you know, but these are discussions that we should be having, right?
We should. And I mean, on the vegan issue, I applauded the decision of Mark and Ian there, but, and I know this is where you and I fundamentally disagree, I am a carnivore. I am a carnivore through and through, and like I wouldn't expect you to apologise for being a vegan, I'm not going to apologise for being a carnivore. It's kind of who we are. But
the thing is with
I applauded it. It was a great decision. It was a valid decision, and it was a necessary one. I thought that was a real good stance. It was the conversation on the day around that was brilliant. It was. Yes, there were some negatives, but the amount of positives that I heard walking around at lunchtime, after there'd been a quick trip to Sainsbury's to make sure that I'd got some food to eat. But
discussion for another day. I'll.
Yeah. It's. I think if we can be more open around where we struggle, or at least if we can educate ourselves to the point of thinking, well, hold on, maybe that person who isn't joining in at the party isn't standoffish. Maybe they just don't like groups of big people. Maybe that person who leaves the party early isn't a party pooper. Maybe they just can only deal with crowds for a certain amount of time. Right. And that's me.
And do you know what? And the thing that is very difficult about that is if somebody has, is finding it hard for whatever reason, whether it's alcohol, crowds, anxiety, whatever their issue is, we all as a group have a tendency, if someone says, oh, I'm going to go now, like, oh no, stay. And then you've got to go through this whole rigmarole of like that argument about like, no, you have to come up with excuses as to why you have to go, right? And like that doesn't make it any easier for someone.
No, it doesn't, because they might be people that you don't want to open up about having social anxiety issues to.
Yeah.
So for me, I've made sure I've got a few people around me in the community who know that I have social anxiety issues. So Scottish Summit, speaker's meal on the Friday night. I went to the pub beforehand. I hung around before the meal. It came to going to sit down for the meal, and I just went to Ian and I went, I've reached my limit. I need to go and have some space on my own. He gave me a hug, said, fully get it, fully appreciate it, go find some space. The next day, he and Mark both checked on me to see if I was okay.
Oh man, they're
and
brilliant
everything.
for that. Yeah.
And it's that those small actions. And if we as a community, and I mean, I'd love for this to spread out beyond our Microsoft community to the tech community as a whole, and to start having conversations wider, and to see these stigmas and just this awareness of people more and more.
Yeah.
Because the minute we have that awareness, we're going to become so much more welcoming. We're going to find more people feel able to come to user group meetings or to conferences, or to reach out on Twitter or LinkedIn or blogs, or if more and more people realise that it's okay to not be okay, it's going to enable so many more people to actually have a voice, I think.
Yeah, and like encouraging diversity really should be what this community is about, right? That's the reality of the situation. And whilst we're diverse in some ways, we're really not diverse in a lot of others. You know, and that's something that that we need to look at, because if all we're listening to is an echo chamber of the same people as us, then you know, that doesn't help us to drive technology forward, and it doesn't help us to be allies. You know, like the whole Black Lives Matter thing is massively relevant at the moment. I'm educating myself on how to be an ally to people of colour. And I would like to be an ally for people who struggle with mental health. I would like to be an ally for people who are suffering gender or other identity issues. And like, if you look at it realistically, we don't have that many people of color in our community. We have like a handful. I don't know anybody that is transgender, or I don't know. I don't know anybody that's differently abled. You know, obviously differently abled. I think there's one or two people that have small issues that they deal with, or you know, I know there are people that have physical health challenges, etc. But you know, I think we need to be a lot more diverse, and we need to be inclusive, and we need to be supportive and be allies to all types of people to make that happen, right?
Yes, we do.
And that starts with education, realistically.
Yeah, and let's be cheesy here. That's why we need to talk about the things we don't talk about.
Things we don't talk about. See what we did there? See what we did there?
So right, I think you and I have talked. Oh, the one big thing that does need to be mentioned, and need to make this kind of quite clear from the offset: neither you nor I are mental health specialists. Anything that we talk about, anything that we suggest or advise, I know I will have done research beforehand on those specific issues, but they will be personal opinions and recommendations. We're not going to be there to give medical advice. We're not going to be there to give clinical diagnoses or anything like that. And I think it's important that people realise that we're not trying to set ourselves up as mental health experts.
Yeah, this is just to open the dialogue, right? Just
exactly.
to get the subject out there.
It's a conversation. And getting it out there, we want all sorts of people on this podcast. We're going to be covering all sorts of topics. So neurodiversity, imposter syndrome, social anxiety, depression, addictions and substance abusers, just to name a few off the top of my head that you and I have talked about. But we want to reach out and get people on the podcast who feel able to share some of their experiences, whether it's experiences that they've had firsthand and they're able to talk about it openly, or whether it's experiences that they've seen in the workplace and can share where they've learnt from it. So to that end, we'll be putting things out on Twitter for people to sign up and volunteer to come on our show, because you and I both know loads of people, but we don't know those that we don't know about who might actually have a very good message to send.
Right, and we don't want to just keep inviting the same bunch of people that we already know. We would like to hear from people that we don't know.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest. Our community podcasts all seem to feature the same recurring cast of characters. So let's get more people involved. Let's get those outliers. Let's get those people who don't feel they've got a voice involved to come on and talk. I think we've got some exciting speakers already lined up.
We have indeed a bit of a celebrity for our first episode.
That is just going to be so awesome. I spoke to them at Microsoft Ignite, and straight away they were like, "I want to be on this podcast. I need to be on this podcast." And I know you've spoken to them, and they're just so keen to be a part of this, and it's a really good subject for us to kick off with. And I'm being deliberately vague because I want you all to tune into our first episode of the podcast. So yeah, it's exciting. You and I have got a lot of stuff to get on with to make sure we make the best of this, and hopefully the people that have listened to us waffle on, two friends chatting away, which is as it should be. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll tune into episode 1 of the things we don't talk about.
Awesome. I think we'll leave it there for now then.
Yeah, it's always a lovely pleasure to chat to you, Alison.
Always a pleasure, never a chore, Mike.
Indeed. And yeah, well, there you go. We'll
see you on the next episode.
Episode 1 coming soon.
Thanks, Mike. Speak soon.
Cheers, Alison.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Things We Don't Talk About with Alison Mulligan and Mike Hartley.